Welcome to the Empowerment Zone with Ramona Houston, where we zone in on Black and Brown relations and our journey to empowering our communities.
Thank you for joining the Empowerment Zone. I am your host, Ramona Houston. Today we have Michelle DeGrate joining us today, and she is a rising superstar at my alma mater, the University of Texas at Austin. She is Director of Development for University Priorities in the Office of the President. And in this role, she engages alumni of color, as well as disengaged and underengaged alumni. She works to engage alumni in order to garner support for students. We know how important it is to get alumni involved in the university as givers financially, with their time, their influence. And so she's the one working to get that support. Welcome, Michelle.
Welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am excited to have you today. One of the topics that we are really focused on in the Empowerment Zone is the importance of philanthropy. And so I'm extremely excited that you're here as a professional in the field of philanthropy to discuss the significance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in development and fundraising. So could you tell us a little bit, I know you just recently moved to Austin. Could you tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, who you are, what you do, and what brought you to Austin?
Okay, yeah, definitely. Well, I'm a Texas native through and through. So I grew up Central Texas, really small town, McGregor, Texas. And then through college sports, playing basketball, I ended up in the DFW area and attended University of North Texas, where I got my undergrad in social work and really started my career in social work. I did early on child welfare, working for Child Protective Services and a number of other nonprofits working with children and family. And then went back and got my graduate degree from social work. So at heart, I always tell people I'm a social worker. I'm a licensed social worker first. And that's really what drove me toward philanthropy and fundraising generally, is just that understanding of what resource obtainment and needs in your community, what it takes to really make a difference in people's lives. And so while I was in DFW, I was a vice president of a nonprofit, Christian Community Action, where I really got my first go at philanthropy. And it was during the Obama administration. He came in and he had a stimulus packet, and I worked for a nonprofit that had never taken federal dollars. And so me and colleagues worked on a grant and brought in $2 million just from writing and filling out an application to an organization. And I was amazed. I was like, well, this is my thing. This is my calling. I can write, I can storytell, and I can help people. So I had my first experience with fundraising there. And from there, just really had never looked back. I wrote that grant, brought in $2 million, and I was still a social worker and I was administering the grant. And so I saw what $2 million could do versus not having it just months prior to. And it was this ability to really deeply engage the people that I was working with in a way that I had never even conceptualized. And it was just the difference between not having and having funds. And so from there, I was like, well, that's how my brain works. That's what I want to do. I want to figure out how to do the biggest impact possible. And so I moved from the front lines, like most people of color at nonprofits. That's kind of how you get to leadership, is you start in the front lines and then you work your way up. And so I did grant writing, and then I managed the grants. And then, like I told you, I eventually was vice president there. And then after about 9 years there, I just decided that I wanted to go to the capital city, the place where needs in Texas were going to be great and I could make a bigger impact. And so I picked up everything and moved to Austin, and started working for a grassroots organization called AfricanAmerican Youth Harvest Foundation, working with at-risk youth, doing development, helping them fundraise. It was a Black-owned nonprofit. And so I really got to see my new community through that lens and really understand what education equity and what education looked like in this area for people of color, and really, really kind of introduced myself to the area. And so it kind of like at that point put my sights on UT, but I wasn't quite ready there yet. And so from there, I worked at Goodwill, Central Texas, and really just built a network and really got to see the infrastructure of Austin. But before I knew it, I got recruited for this amazing position at UT. And that's really where we met, is during my first few months here at UT. They were so courageous to create a position that was really focused on fundraising, but more specifically, discovery specifically around alumni that had been disengaged, unengaged, or never engaged. And the reason that really spoke to me is because I knew at the heart of that were going to be people of color. Not because of University of Texas being any different or being deficient in this way, but because of just the nature of philanthropy. There is a lot of, I would say, a misunderstanding or misperceptions with regards to what donors look like. And subsequently, people of color are not often the people that are being engaged at the level that we can be. And it's not because we don't give, it's because we're not being asked. And so I was really excited about the opportunity to be able to bring that asset to the University of Texas.
So let's talk about that. Black people's understanding of philanthropy, and then how other people view us in terms of philanthropy. We know that Black people give, right? We give in all time. We tithe. If we go to church, we give our 10%, right?
Yes.
We also give to important organizations within our communities, such as fraternities and sororities, and all the civic and community engagement work that they do. We know if we have money, we're going to be supporting some members of the family, right? We're going to be paying for those dance lessons. We're going to send that child some money in college. We give in all types of ways. And so I think some of us don't feel like that is called philanthropy. We need to figure out a term for that what that is, because when we think of philanthropy, right, we think of these big, rich donors giving to some institutions, but we are philanthropic. So can you talk about it in two terms, in two ways, about how Black people define philanthropy and also how others look at us in terms of being philanthropic? Ye have not because ye ask not, right? And we're not being asked. That's why your position exists, to ask and engage us. But can you expand a little bit more on those concepts?
You hit a lot of the major points. Really, more than anything, I always like to tell people you have to start with the idea that Black people give. Just like it's the same conversation. Black people tip too, just so you know, like we are givers, right? And I mean, it's data, right? Let's start with the data, because sometimes you think these anecdotal things, but 25%, we give 25% more of our household income to community, to churches, to the places that we feel compelled to give more than any other demographic.
Can you repeat that just in case the audience didn't hear that?
We give 25% more of our income, our household income annually than any other demographic. And I say that because often, really what we're looking for is not that we need a new term. We just need to broaden the term and the understanding of what philanthropy is. Philanthropy is not just $1 million gift. Philanthropy is not just requesting your name on a building. Philanthropy is every giving of self, every opportunity of giving of self. So that's time, that's treasures, that's your support, that's your marching and your protesting, your voice, your advocacy. It's all of it. And America is built on a history of Black philanthropy. We just have never called it that. And you being a history major, you probably know more than I would, but this is historical. This is through the civil rights marches. This is through the separate but equal, where we were told to create separate chains of personal support, right? So we figured out ways to give toward the communities that we lived in and that we were a part of. And so I think sometimes right now it's just emerging. We often just have to figure out how we show up in this new inclusive culture where we understand and don't try to measure ourselves to a culture outside of our own, and don't try to diminish the work that we're doing independently. I say all that to say, like, the reason I say that we define it differently is because we are self-help type people. I can't think of any semblance of community, Black community, where we weren't taking care of our own, where we weren't helping or giving the cup of sugar to the neighbor, where we weren't tithing, like it's a thing.
Or give it to the building fund, or give it to the building
fund on top of the tithing. So we are, like I said, we give more than. As a percentage of our household incomes, we are giving at a higher rate than anyone else. And I have to keep saying that because most people don't understand that. And every year, there's not a lot of research around it because there's this idea and this myth that we're trying to debunk. But 2/3 of African-American households donate approximately $11 billion annually in the United States. That's what we could record and find. Yes. And so there's even a greater impact, right? And so with this understanding that we are givers, that we are assets to any university, any organization, then how is it that this myth is still there? And I think that's really what I'm so excited about my job and what University of Texas is really doing intentionally. And beyond that, really kind of what is happening throughout the nation around philanthropy and fundraising. Fundraising professionals are starting to realize that there are cultural differences that have to be accounted for. You have to understand that the way that a Black person or a Hispanic person or a person of color defines philanthropy has to do with the way in which they were raised, in the way in which they assimilate to culture. And you have to be capable of taking your organizational message and translating it in a way that is respectful of those understanding of those cultures, of those different defining of philanthropy. And I think that's really where fundraising has to grow, right? I think according to 2 years ago, the AFP released a report of the 30,000 plus fundraisers, members, a part of AFP.
Tell your acronym, say what your acronym stands for.
The Association of Fundraising Professionals.
Thank you.
Less than 10% were people of color. Not less than 10% were Black, people of color. That's Hispanic, that's Asian, that's Black. And what that says to me is that there's less than 10% people taking a message to donors and prospects of color in a way that they understand it. And so subsequently, you are going to see that there's a lower percentage of organizations being able to access or tap into the resources that are available in their community. They're not hiding. I think one of the first things that I realized in my job at UT is like, I was thinking, I'm going to have to dig. I'm going to have to dig really hard to find all of these people. And then, I found you in my first couple of weeks, and it was like, has anyone ever had a conversation with you? And you're like, no. And it's not because you're not brilliant. It's because there was no one that could really understand. Either they were intimidated by the conversation, or they didn't understand the value that was in front of them because of their own implicit biases. And so I would say first recognize that we are givers, but then there's a second call to action, which is to explore implicit biases. What is it that we personally are carrying around that would limit our ability to really truthfully engage all of the available resources that are going to be imperative to creating the world that we want? Because what we also have to know is that all of this is important because resources are power. Your ability to impact change in this nation that we live in is equally connected to your capacity to really provide financial resources to mobilize said change. And so I always tell people, when I'm talking to alumni, I'm always in this place where I want to honor your experience. I want to hear what you've experienced from the organization. I want to champion and tell you about the changes that are happening on campus. But I always leave with a call of action, because for there to be a different future, there has to be different voices at the table and different leaders coming to contribute to all of the different conversations necessary to really kind of mobilize any changes that we want to see on campus. And it comes down to if there's a big change happening, if there's a big change that you want on campus, and every person at the table is a monolithic view of alumni, then the changes are likely going to have a monolithic sway. And so, as I say, because philanthropy is more than just money. Philanthropy is giving of time. And so, my first step is, I don't want to ask you for dollars. I want to say, are you engaged in the boards? Are you engaged in the student support? Are you engaged in recruiting efforts? Are you available to talk to students? Are you available to mentor? Are you available to volunteer? Because that is philanthropy. And once you're at the table, once you're already contributing in that way, you will understand the need for the financial resources. And so I think it's really this conversation of understanding that you really have to strive to broaden the definition of philanthropy with every conversation that you have, and let people know that they are an endless resource. Most people don't realize that, $20, that's money, right? But 20 hours, it's equal. It's immeasurable in some capacities. And so, I think it's really having people have the courage to sit and go through that spectrum of conversation where I hear you, I understand, I let you help me define what you think philanthropy is. I give you my take on what philanthropy is, and we meet somewhere in the middle and really start to have true conversations about what it takes to actually impact change. Because that's really what mission is, always the driver for philanthropy. You're never just raising money for raising money. You're always trying to move toward a better future. And for me, it's a better future for our students and educational equity, which is a passion of mine. And one of the reasons that I'm in higher education, it's making sure that every student has capacity and has the opportunity to leave campus better than they came and capable of, accessing upward mobility so that they can come back and give back in the same ways that I'm asking alumni to give now.
So that's, thank you very much for that extensive explanation on how the multiple ways that Black people give, as well as changing the idea of philanthropy and how we see philanthropy, as well as how others see us in our philanthropic efforts. And those call to actions, to say, hey, we need to do this, this, and this. Looking at it from the other side of the coin as a professional in philanthropy, what advice or suggestions would you give the field of philanthropy in terms of engaging more people of color in the area of philanthropy as professionals? You talked about only 10% of professionals are people in philanthropy are people of color, but how do we get more people engaged in terms of people who are in leadership roles? How do we recruit more people, but also how we can get more people of color to consider philanthropy in their professional evolution and in their professional careers?
I can say for me, it was first, it was the ability for my direct boss at the time to go past her own implicit biases that said to her initially, I can't have a frontline staff gift officer because she would be entering into a world where she might not be seen, right? There is this concern and this overprotection and this buffering because of this idea that affluent looks one way and subsequently responds to one way, one person, one type of person. And so I think in broadening your definition of what philanthropy looks like, you therefore can broaden who you believe can access the gifts of philanthropy. But beyond that, there has to be a lot of organizational intentionality around creating a culture that supports fundraisers that are people of color. And I say that because fundraising alone reflects and magnifies the racial hierarchies of our culture, period. It's just, if you want to explore elite and all of the different workings of that, that's just the nature of it, right? Because there is a part of philanthropy that is about financial capacity. But there are microaggressions that happen that really make the day-to-day difficult. It's the, you're so articulate. It's the you should wear your hair straight when you go out to these meetings. It's a lot of the things that like I say, it comes down to a personal awareness. And I think that unless there's leadership that's willing to call it what it is and really address it for what it is, it's hard to create a culture that you could recruit them, but I don't think you'll keep them. And that's what I've really, pushed is that, recruiting we're out here. I mean, because I said I started front lines. There's no better storytellers than a lot of people of color because of the route in which we have to take to get to leadership. We're not coming from a business background into these areas of mission. We most often have started at the bottom and really seen the system in this very comprehensive way and moved through the system in a way that allows for us to tell stories in a very comprehensive and meaningful way. But once we get to the top, there's this rejection that happens because of the microaggressions and because of these implicit biases that have to be explored. And so I will say there has to be intentionality around diversity and equity and inclusion training, but not just the training, not just going through and doing the weekend, training session and then coming back and being like, I got my certificate. It's the integrating it into the everyday working environment. It's when we distribute stories to tell to donors, they are diverse. They are representative of all populations and not just a story that has a matching marketing picture of smiling, happy African-American student on my account. It's how do you leverage that story? How do you take that story to an alumni of color? How do you do it in a way that does not assume anything, but really allows it to be a tool to be explored so that they can tell you what they see out of the story. I always say, like, you can create some of the best stories, but if you take it to someone and go, you're going to like this story, that you might not like your response that you get because they're going to be like, why? Why would you assume that? I went to a completely different school. I had a completely different experience. And so I think, it's really not trying to shortcut it. Right? Not trying to get a lot of people of color fundraisers to get a lot of people of color donors. It's creating an environment where both naturally exist and you are not only recruiting people of color, but you are allowing people of color to influence your culture in a way that every gift officer that you have is equipped in a way that you have a diverse pool of donors and prospects being seen and engaged by all of your gift officers, because you're not just recruiting for said one position to go out and reach one market and then that's how we'll house this little, but you're really saying, hey, we value every culture here, we value every person here, and every person has the ability to really impact culture, and we're going to do everything that we can to create an environment that allows for us to do the best good. Because that's really what it comes back down to, is that we want to do the best good for our mission. And so you will see that a byproduct of that type of environment is that you reach more people of color and you recruit more people and keep more people of color. It's when you do it the other way that you feel you tokenize people, and tokenized people don't usually stay, and tokenized people don't usually give, not long term. So it's really about relationships, and it's about really respecting each person individually.
That's great advice. The philanthropic community really needs to be intentional about creating a culture that supports people of color, both as donors and as professionals. And culture is really the essence. Like, what kind of culture does your organization have? What type of culture does the profession have? What type of culture do we have in philanthropy that allows us to engage various different groups? Thank you. Thank you very much. We have run out of time. This has been a great conversation. It's amazing how fast this time flies. Do you have any final thoughts you would like to share in terms of the importance of having or the significance of diversity, equity, inclusion in development and fundraising?
Like most diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, it takes time and intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it requires a patience and a resilience on both ends. And I think that it's really, development and fundraising will never be anything other than relationships and storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as long as you go into every conversation as you are planning to, grow your teams, or you're planning to take on your next meeting with the idea that I'm going to come into the room and respect every perspective, not accept, but respect every perspective that is provided, I think you can't go wrong. I've made some of my best professional and personal relationships because of that intentionality and having the ability to just really show up and respect the relationship for what it is and seeing past my implicit biases, right? So I think in the end, it's really just about relationships. And so, I think taking that is really, I think it's that simple. Sometimes we want to make it complex, but it's really just about what we would do to maintain a good friendship.
Well, I am delighted that you reached out to me and that we now have a relationship. Congratulations on your new role. I wish you much success at the University of Texas, at Austin, my alma mater. And if there is any way that I can assist you through helping you to reach other alumni, helping to support your work, I am here for you. I appreciate you being my guest on the Empowerment Zone. And finally, I would, again, my guest today is Michelle DeGrate, who is Director of Development for Priorities in the Office of the President at the University of Texas at Austin. And I always like to give young people, I'm a big advocate for college, and I always like to give our audience strategies for college success. Do you have one strategy that you would like to share with our audience?
Seek expansive experiences. Seek experiences that are beyond campus, beyond the communities that you come from, beyond the demographics of friends that you have. Seek to broaden your world as much as possible. Everybody can't go study abroad, but do your internships, seek mentors that are outside of your spectrum of people that you normally interact with. I will say that one of the greatest assets of college is the ability to broaden your perspective of the world, and that will carry you through and through as you're navigating outside of college.
So could you tell us again what colleges you attended?
I attended the University of North Texas in Denton and the University of Texas at Arlington.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle, for joining us today, and I look forward to having you back again soon.
All right. Thank you for having me. Welcome.
A special thank you to the incredible team of the Empowerment Zone. Terry Gully, theme song, NADWorks, digital support, and of course, our featured guest.
If you enjoyed my podcast, please subscribe. We are on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Be sure to rate us on Apple Podcasts too. Thank you for your continued support.